The winter of 1944 brought a challenge that would test every fiber of military leadership. Imagine receiving orders to completely reverse your army's direction within 3 days. Picture leading hundreds of thousands of soldiers through the harshest winter conditions Europe had seen in 6 decades. Most military commanders would declare such a task impossible. The logistics alone would crush ordinary leadership. But George S. Patton, Jr. was no ordinary general. December 19, 1944 marked a pivotal moment in military history. Emergency bells rang throughout Allied headquarters. Senior commanders rushed to Verdun for a crisis meeting that would determine the war's outcome. Eisenhower's face showed the strain of command as reports flooded in from the front lines. The situation was catastrophic. Hitler's surprise attack had torn a massive gap through American defensive positions. German forces were pouring through the Ardennes forest like water through a broken dam. The offensive caught everyone off guard, except one man. When Patton stood up in that crowded room and calmly announced he could attack within 48 hours using 2 full divisions, silence fell over the gathering. Fellow generals exchanged glances of disbelief. Some thought he was bluffing. Others wondered if the pressure had finally broken his mind. The German High Command was celebrating their achievement. Their winter offensive had accomplished what many believed impossible. Complete strategic surprise against overconfident American forces. 3 entire German armies were charging toward their objectives. 250,000 troops, supported by 1,000 tanks, were carving through frozen forests. Their destination was Antwerp, the crucial port that supplied Allied operations. German commanders believed they could split British and American forces permanently. A negotiated peace seemed within reach. After all, who could possibly halt such overwhelming force during the worst winter in living memory? Average temperatures had dropped to -7 degrees Celsius. Snow fell constantly. Visibility remained nearly zero for days at a time. Roads became sheets of ice that claimed vehicles and lives with equal brutality. These conditions would have stopped most armies cold, but the Germans underestimated American resolve. More critically, they had never encountered George Patton's unique brand of warfare. This general would transform their ambitious offensive into their final catastrophe on the Western Front. The snow would indeed run red with blood, but not American blood. The story of how one man's audacity changed the course of history began decades before the Ardennes battle. Lieutenant General George Smith Patton, Jr. had reached 59 years of age when destiny summoned him. Born into a military family in 1885, every moment of his life had prepared him for this crisis. Military tradition flowed through his veins. His ancestors had fought in every American war since the Revolution. Young George absorbed lessons from history's greatest commanders. He studied Napoleon's campaigns until he knew every battle by heart. Alexander's conquests fascinated him. Caesar's commentaries shaped his understanding of leadership under pressure. By December 1944, Patton commanded the Third Army. Over 250,000 men answered to his orders. Hundreds of tanks rolled under his banner. His reputation as the most aggressive armored commander in Allied forces was well established. But December 16th changed everything forever. The Third Army was grinding through the Saar region when catastrophe struck elsewhere. Patton's forces were preparing their own offensive into Germany's industrial heartland. Victory seemed within grasp. Then Hitler unleashed Operation Watch on the Rhine. Pre-dawn darkness concealed the German assault. 29 divisions smashed into thinly held American positions throughout the Ardennes forest. The attack's audacity stunned military observers worldwide. German forces planned to drive 60 miles through Belgium and Luxembourg. Their ultimate goal was seizing Antwerp and splitting Allied armies permanently. What made the offensive truly shocking was its complete surprise. Allied intelligence had failed catastrophically. The Wehrmacht had moved 250,000 men into position using only night movements. Radio silence concealed their preparations. When dawn broke on December 16th, American forces faced an enemy they never saw coming. Complete tactical surprise achieved devastating results within hours. German tanks raced westward at unprecedented speed. American positions crumbled under the assault. Panic spread through Allied headquarters as reports of breakthrough after breakthrough arrived. The critical moment arrived December 19th. General Dwight Eisenhower convened his emergency meeting at Verdun. The situation demanded immediate action. German forces had already advanced 20 miles into Belgium. Strategic crossroads lay threatened. The vital town of Bastogne faced encirclement. The First Army was disintegrating. Entire divisions had been scattered or destroyed. If German advances continued at their current pace, they might actually reach Antwerp. Their strategic objective remained achievable. Something had to be done immediately. Understanding what happened next requires knowing the man who shaped the battle's outcome. George Patton had spent his entire military career preparing for exactly this moment. Every training exercise, every battle, every setback had taught him lessons he would now apply. His early World War I experiences proved decisive. As a young officer, he commanded America's first tank units in combat. Those battles taught him the overwhelming power of armored warfare. Rapid offensive action could achieve results that traditional tactics never could. Speed and aggression became his trademarks. But Patton's journey to the Ardennes had been anything but smooth. Brilliant leadership in North Africa and Sicily had earned him fame and controversy in equal measure. The infamous slapping incidents nearly destroyed his career. He had struck 2 soldiers suffering from combat fatigue. Public outcry followed. His superiors questioned his judgment. These controversies kept him out of the initial D-Day landings. Many believed his career was finished. However, his reputation for aggressive leadership and tactical brilliance made him too valuable to discard. The Germans feared him more than any other Allied commander. German respect for Patton became the centerpiece of an elaborate deception operation. Allied planners convinced the Wehrmacht that he was preparing to invade Calais rather than Normandy. His imaginary army group tied down entire German divisions that might have reinforced the actual invasion beaches. When the Third Army finally landed in France during July 1944, Patton had learned to channel his aggressive instincts more effectively. His leadership style remained unique among Allied commanders. While other generals managed their armies from comfortable headquarters miles behind the front, Patton spent his days visiting frontline units. He traveled constantly in an open jeep through enemy fire. Soldiers needed to see their commander sharing their dangers and hardships. This wasn't mere showmanship. Patton understood that leadership required personal example under fire. His presence on the battlefield inspired confidence throughout his command. The Third Army's rapid advance across France had already demonstrated Patton's tactical genius beyond question. After breaking out of Normandy, his forces advanced 600 miles in just 4 months. They liberated thousands of square miles of occupied territory. Hundreds of thousands of German prisoners fell into their hands. However, autumn 1944 brought unexpected frustration. Supply shortages slowed operations to a crawl. Stubborn German resistance in fortified positions like Metz proved costly. Many observers began questioning whether Patton was merely a pursuit commander. Perhaps he was effective when chasing beaten enemies, but less capable when facing determined opposition. The Battle of the Bulge would prove that assessment completely wrong. What Patton demonstrated during winter 1944 challenged traditional military concepts entirely. Impossible logistics became possible through superior leadership and meticulous preparation. When Eisenhower asked how long turning the Third Army north would require, Patton's answer stunned everyone present. While other commanders struggled to understand the German offensive's full scope, Patton was already planning 3 steps ahead. Unknown to his fellow generals at Verdun, Patton had anticipated this exact possibility. His intelligence staff had detected unusual German activity weeks earlier. They had prepared 3 separate contingency plans for a northward movement. This was Patton's true genius. He didn't simply react to events. He anticipated them. While other commanders were caught completely off guard by the German offensive, Patton saw it as a golden opportunity. The enemy had overextended themselves. Their supply lines were vulnerable. Their flanks were exposed. The scale of what Patton proposed defied every conventional military wisdom. He offered to disengage 6 full divisions from active combat immediately. These forces would turn 90 degrees and march over 100 miles through the worst winter weather in decades, all while maintaining complete combat effectiveness. Most military theorists would have declared this impossible. Moving an army in contact with the enemy ranks among the most difficult military maneuvers possible. Doing it during winter over icy roads while maintaining operational surprise seemed beyond the realm of possibility. Roads were sheets of ice. Vehicles broke down constantly. Men froze at their posts. But Patton understood something that textbooks couldn't teach. Audacious action could transform desperate situations into decisive victories. His philosophy remained elegantly simple. Attack. Always attack. He believed enemies were always weaker than they appeared. Rapid, aggressive action could overcome almost any disadvantage. This wasn't reckless bravado driving his decisions. It was calculated aggression based on superior preparation and intimate understanding of enemy limitations. Patton had studied his German opponents for months. He knew their strengths and weaknesses better than they knew themselves. The German strategy revealed a fundamental flaw that Patton recognized immediately. Hitler's plan required precise timing and perfect execution. German forces carried limited fuel supplies. They had enough for only 6 days of operations. Success depended on capturing Allied fuel dumps to continue their advance. Time was their enemy. They needed to reach their objectives quickly before Allied air power could intervene effectively. Any significant delay would doom the offensive to complete failure. Weather had grounded Allied aircraft initially, but clear skies would bring devastating air attacks. Patton's solution was elegantly simple in concept, but extraordinarily complex in execution. Instead of trying to stop the German offensive where it was strongest, he would attack where they were most vulnerable. At the base of the Bulge, German forces were overextended and exposed. His 3-division assault would achieve multiple objectives simultaneously. It would relieve the besieged garrison at Bastogne. More importantly, it would threaten to cut off the entire German spearhead. Success would trap hundreds of thousands of German troops in a pocket with no escape routes. December 19th saw Patton leave the Verdun Conference and immediately implement his audacious plan. He telephoned his headquarters and uttered just 2 words: "Play ball." This predetermined code phrase activated operational orders his staff had prepared in advance. Within hours, over 133,000 Third Army vehicles began moving north. The 4th Armored Division led the way. The 80th Infantry Division followed close behind. The 26th Infantry Division completed the spearhead. Support echelons carried 62,000 tons of supplies. The conditions they faced defied description. This was the coldest winter in European living memory. Temperatures averaged -7 degrees Celsius continuously. Snowfall made visibility nearly impossible during daylight hours. Darkness brought even worse conditions. American forces lacked adequate winter clothing for such extreme conditions. Many soldiers had only cotton-filled jackets and wool coats for protection against Arctic temperatures. Weapons froze solid and required constant maintenance. Truck engines needed starting every half hour to prevent oil from congealing into useless sludge. But Patton had prepared for this moment in ways that went far beyond mere logistics considerations. He understood that winter warfare was as much a battle of morale as it was of material resources. While other commanders huddled in heated headquarters, Patton made himself visible to his troops constantly. He traveled continuously in an open jeep despite the glacial temperatures. His only concession to the brutal cold was a heavy winter parka. His face often froze during these inspections, but he continued his daily rounds regardless. Word of his presence filtered rapidly through the ranks. The psychological impact was enormous beyond measure. American soldiers fighting in conditions that would have broken lesser units drew strength from knowing their commander shared their ordeal. His words of praise and encouragement spread like wildfire through the Third Army's informal communication network. These weren't empty gestures or meaningless rhetoric. Patton genuinely believed his soldiers were capable of achieving the impossible. His absolute confidence became theirs. They would follow him anywhere, under any conditions, against any enemy. This mutual trust would prove decisive in the battles ahead. The German reaction to Patton's movement reveals the true genius of his strategy. General Erich Brandenberger commanded the German 7th Army facing Patton's sector. He had expected some reaction from Allied forces. Patton's reputation for aggressive armored warfare was well known throughout the Wehrmacht. Brandenberger had even acknowledged that Patton conducted operations according to fundamental German concepts of mobile warfare. But even this experienced commander was stunned by the speed and precision of the Third Army's northward wheel. No army should have been capable of such a complex maneuver under winter conditions. German commanders had not anticipated that any Allied force could execute such movements. The Wehrmacht's own experiences in Russia had taught them how winter could paralyze even the most efficient military machines. They assumed American forces would be even more vulnerable to winter's effects. This miscalculation reveals a fundamental flaw in German strategic thinking by late 1944. They continued underestimating American military effectiveness consistently. German generals viewed United States forces as materially rich, but lacking in fighting spirit and tactical competence. This prejudice would cost them dearly. German General Gunther Blumentritt later admitted their respect for Patton specifically. We regarded General Patton extremely highly as the most aggressive panzer general of the Allies. His operations impressed us enormously, probably because he came closest to our own concept of the classical military commander. But by December 1944, the Wehrmacht was no longer the force that had conquered Europe in 1940. The divisions attacking in the Ardennes represented a mixture of elite units and hastily assembled formations. Many contained teenagers and old men pressed into service. Experience and equipment were both lacking. Many German soldiers had not eaten properly in days. They lacked adequate winter equipment for the conditions they faced. Their vehicles ran on synthetic fuel that performed poorly in cold weather. Supply lines were already stretched beyond breaking point when operations began. The battle that unfolded around Bastogne demonstrated the complete transformation of the American Army. From the inexperienced force that had landed in North Africa in 1942, they had become seasoned professional soldiers. The 101st Airborne Division's defense of Bastogne became legendary throughout the world, but it was Patton's relief operation that turned a defensive victory into an offensive triumph. When German commanders demanded Bastogne's surrender, Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe's one-word reply became enduring American legend. Nuts became a symbol of American determination under pressure. December 22, 1944, arrived with a giant snowstorm raging across the battlefield. In the middle of this blizzard, Patton's three-division army attacked as promised. The assault came as a complete shock to German forces. They had assumed winter conditions would prevent any major Allied counteroffensive. Along a 20-mile front, American tanks and infantry smashed into the exposed German flank. They drove 7 miles into enemy positions during the first day alone. The fighting that followed was savage beyond description. American forces, driven by Patton's relentless demands for aggressive action, refused to yield any ground. The 4th Armored Division spearheaded Patton's advance toward surrounded Bastogne. They faced some of the best remaining units in the entire German army. Panthers and Tigers, the Wehrmacht's most formidable tanks, battled Shermans and tank destroyers across frozen fields. These battlefields soon became graveyards filled with burning steel. Patton had ordered his chaplain, Colonel James Hugh O'Neill, to compose a special prayer for good weather. This prayer was distributed throughout the Third Army's ranks. Almighty and most merciful Father, we humbly beseech Thee of Thy great goodness to restrain these immoderate rains with which we have had to contend. Grant us fair weather for battle. December 23rd brought the answer to their prayers. Skies cleared dramatically across the entire battlefield. Allied fighter-bombers descended on German positions like avenging angels from heaven. The Luftwaffe was nowhere to be seen. German forces found themselves completely exposed to devastating air attacks. The breakthrough finally came December 26th, the day after Christmas. Elements of the 4th Armored Division's 37th Tank Battalion, led by Lieutenant Charles Boggess, punched through stubborn German defenses. They linked up with the 101st Airborne inside Bastogne itself. The corridor they created was only 500 yards wide initially, but it broke the German siege permanently and opened the way for massive reinforcement of the American garrison. Supplies and reinforcements poured through this narrow gap. Bastogne was saved. But Patton wasn't finished with his offensive operations. While other commanders might have been satisfied with relieving Bastogne, he saw the bigger strategic picture clearly. The German offensive had overextended their forces dangerously. This created unprecedented opportunities for devastating counterattacks. "Brad," he told General Bradley with characteristic directness, "this time the Kraut stuck his head in the meat grinder. And I've got hold of the handle." The systematic destruction of German forces in the Ardennes required 6 weeks of brutal winter fighting ahead. American and German soldiers battled in conditions that defied human description. Foxholes had to be carved from ground, frozen solid as concrete. Weapons jammed constantly from extreme cold. Men shared body warmth to prevent freezing to death in their positions. The snow, initially pristine white across the battlefield, gradually turned red with blood from thousands of casualties. Both armies paid a terrible price for every mile of ground gained or lost. But American forces had superior supplies, better equipment, and more effective leadership. January 16, 1945, marked the end of German hopes in the Ardennes. American forces from north and south met at Houffalize, completely eliminating the Bulge. Hitler's offensive, which was supposed to split the Allied coalition and force a negotiated peace, had instead become a catastrophe for German arms. German casualties exceeded 100,000 men killed, wounded, or captured. Over 700 tanks were lost permanently. 1,600 aircraft were destroyed. More importantly, Germany had expended the last of its strategic reserves in a gamble that failed completely. Patton's role in this victory cannot be overstated by any measure. His ability to reposition 6 full divisions within 72 hours while maintaining their combat effectiveness was one of the most remarkable logistical achievements in military history. No other commander could have accomplished this feat. As he wrote to his wife afterward, "Destiny sent for me in a hurry when things got tight. Perhaps God saved me for this effort." The Battle of the Bulge proved that George Patton was far more than just an aggressive tank commander. He was a strategic genius who understood that audacious action could transform desperate situations into decisive victories. The Germans who had laughed at American military competence in December were no longer laughing in January. They had learned at terrible cost that American soldiers led by commanders like Patton could fight and win under the most challenging conditions imaginable. Their respect was purchased with blood. Winston Churchill, never quick to praise American achievements, called the Battle of the Bulge undoubtedly the greatest American battle of the war. High praise indeed from Britain's wartime leader. But for George Patton, it represented something even more significant. It was the vindication of a lifetime spent preparing for the moment when everything would depend on one man's ability to turn an impossible situation into inevitable victory. Every training exercise, every previous battle, every setback had led to this climactic test of leadership under ultimate pressure. The snow had indeed turned red across the Ardennes battlefield, but it was German blood that stained the winter fields, not American. Hitler's final gamble had become his greatest defeat. The Wehrmacht would never recover from losses sustained during their winter offensive. In the end, the Battle of the Bulge revealed a fundamental truth about warfare that Patton understood better than any other commander of his generation. Superior leadership, aggressive action, and absolute confidence in one's soldiers could overcome any tactical disadvantage. Material superiority meant nothing without inspired leadership. The Germans had launched their offensive believing that winter weather and American inexperience would guarantee success. Instead, they discovered that George Patton's Third Army could fight anywhere, anytime, against any enemy. Weather, terrain, and numbers meant nothing when properly led soldiers believed in their cause and their commander. The Ardennes became not Hitler's triumph, but his final defeat on the Western Front. It marked the moment when American arms achieved their finest hour in the crucible of winter warfare. One man's audacity had changed the course of history itself.